Hello, welcome to Biology, the scientific study of life. A classification of seedless vascular plants. As noted earlier, living seedless vascular plants form two clades, lycophytes and pterophytes. Lycophytes phylum Lycophyta include club mosses, spike mosses, and quillworts. Pterophytes phylum Pterophyta include ferns, horsetails, and whisk ferns and their relatives because they differ greatly in appearance. Ferns, horsetails, and whisk ferns have long been considered separate phyla. Phylum Pterophyta ferns, phylum Siphnophyta horsetails, also called Siphnophytes, and phylum Xylophyta whisk ferns, and related genus, together known as Xylophytes. However, recent molecular comparisons provide convincing evidence that all three groups from a clade. Notice that accordingly, many systematists now classify them together as the phylum Pterophyta. This figure on the facing page describes general groups of seedless vascular plants: phylum Lycophyta, club mosses, spike mosses, and quillworts. Modern species of lycophytes, the most primitive group of vascular plants, are relics of a far more eminent past by the Carboniferous period. There were two evolutionary lines, one composite of small herbaceous plants and another line of giant woody trees with diameters of more than 2 meters and height of more than 40 meters. The giant lycophytes thrived for millions of years in moist swamps, but they become extinct when the climate became drier at the end of the Carboniferous period. The small lycophytes survived, represented today by about 1,200 species, though some are commonly called club mosses and spike mosses. They are not true mosses, which are bryophytes. Notice this figure, seedless vascular plant diversities. This one represents. Notice also the aquawort. This is the seed, and a spike moss. This one, and notice also the whisk here, clusters of sporophyllus. Notice that. Xylophyte, and this one represents a Flexifemina lady fern. This one fairness, and this one represent equisterm field horsetail. This represent a vegetative stem and stropolize on fertile stem, and this one represent a whisk fern, fern and relatives. Notice that the differences between lady fern and whisk fern. Phylum Pterophyta. Phylum Pterophyta, ferns, horsetails, and whisk ferns and relatives. Ferns radiated extensively from their Duvinin origins and grow alongside tree lycophytes and horsetails in the great Carboniferous swamp forests. Today, ferns are by far the most widespread seedless vascular plants, numbering more than 20,000 species. Though most diverse in the tropic, many ferns thrive in temperate forests, and some species are even adapted to arid habitats. Horsetails were very diverse during the Carboniferous period, some growing as tall as 15 meters. However, today, only about 15 species survive as a single, widely distributed genus Equistem whisk ferns, and a closely related genus Chimiza from a clade consisting mainly of tropical epiphytes. Whisk ferns, the only vascular plants lacking two roots and leaves, are called living fossils because of their striking resemblance of fossils of ancient relatives of living vascular plants. However, much evidence, including analysis of DNA sequences and sperm structure, indicates that Cotyledon and Timizabres are closely related to ferns. This hypothesis suggests that their ancestors' true roots and leaves were lost during evolution. The significance of seedless vascular plants, the ancestors of living lycophytes, hostels, and ferns, along with their seedless vascular relatives, grow to great height during the Carboniferous, forming the first forests. With the evolution of vascular tissue, roots, and leaves, these plants accelerated the rate of photosynthesis dramatically, increasing the removal of CO2 from the atmosphere. Scientists estimate that CO2 levels dropped by as much as factor of 5 during the Carboniferous, causing global cooling that resulted in widespread glacier formation. The seedless vascular plants that formed the first forests eventually became coal in the stagnant waters of Carboniferous swamps. The plants did not completely decay. This organic material turned to thick layers of peat, later covered by the sea. Marine sediments piled notice also piled on top and over millions of years heat and pressure converted the peat to coal. In fact, Carboniferous coal deposits are the most extensive ever formed. Coal was crucial to the Industrial Revolution, and people worldwide still burn 6 billion tons a year. It is ironic that coal formed from plants that contributed to a global cooling now contributes to a global warming by returning carbon to the atmosphere. Growing along with the seedless plants in Carboniferous swamps were primitive seed plants, though seed plants were not dominant at that time. They rose to prominence after the swamp began to dry up at the end of the Carboniferous. Plant diversity, second, the evolution of seed swabs. Feeding the world. Continuing the saga of how plants transformed the earth, this chapter follows the emergence and diversification of seed plants. Fossils and comparative studies of living plants offer clues about the origin of seed plants. Some 360 million years ago, seeds changed the course of a plant evolution, enabling their bearers to become the dominant production or producers in most of the terrestrial ecosystems and to make up the vast majority of plant biodiversity. Seed plants have also had an enormous impact on human society. Starting about 30,000 years ago, humans began to domesticate wheat, maize, commonly called corn in the United States, bananas, and other white seed plants. This practice emerged separately in various regions of the world, including the Near East and East Asia and Africa and the Americas. One piece of evidence: the well-preserved squash seed in this figure, notice that was found in a cave of Mexico and dates from between 8,000 and 10,000 years ago. This seed differs from white squash seeds, suggesting that squash was being cultivated by that time. The domestication of seed plants, particularly angiosperms, produced the most important culture change in the human history, transforming most human societies from roving bands of hunter-gatherers to permanent settlements and covered by agriculture. Let's talk about the reduced gametophytes of these plants are protected in ovule and pollen grains. We begin with an overview of key terrestrial adaptations that seed plants added to those already present in bryophytes and seedless vascular plants. Notice that in this figure we will talk about also, in addition to seeds, the following are common to all seed plants: reduced gametophytes, heterospore, ovules, and pollen. Seedless plants lack these adaptations except for a few species that exhibit heterospores or heterospory. Advantages of reduced gametophytes: mosses and other bryophytes or bryophytes have life cycle dominated by gametophytes, whereas ferns and other seedless vascular plants have sporophyte dominated life cycles. The evolutionary trend of gametophyte reduction continued further in the vascular plant lineage that led to seed plants, while the gametophytes of seedless vascular plants are visible to the naked eye. The gametophytes of seed plants are mostly microscopic. This miniaturization allowed for an important evolutionary innovation in seed plants. Their tiny gametophytes can develop from spores retained within the sporangia of the parental sporophyte. This arrangement protects the delicate female containing gametophytes from environmental stresses. The moist reproductive tissues of the sporophyte showed that gametophytes from drought conditions and from UV radiation. This relationship also enables the dependent gametophytes to obtain nutrients from the sporophyte. In contrast, the free-living gametophytes of seedless plants must fend for themselves. This figure contrasts show the sporophyte gametophyte relationships in bryophyte, seedless vascular plants, and seed plants. Let's talk about the differences gametophyte sporophyte relationships. We will begin this one. Sporo represents sporophyte to second generation here, and gametophyte, this one, and sporo dependent in gametophyte, mosses, and other bryophytes. And another one is sporophyte second generation and gametophyte, this one second generation also. Microscopic female gametophyte second, ovulus cones independent or dependent, this one, notice that. And microscopic male gametophyte in pollen cones independent, and notice also the sporophyte independent. Notice the relationship here, and this one is a microscopic female gametophyte. And notice also microscopic female gametophyte inside these parts of flowers dependent, and these are microscopic male gametophyte inside these parts of a flower dependent. And second generation, notice these are sporophyte, the flowering plant independent. This one reduced gametophyte dependent in sporophyte seed plants, gymnosperms and angiosperms. Gametophytes of seed plants are surrounded by sporophyte tissue from which the gametophyte derived its nutrition, unlike bryophytes and most seedless vascular plants. Seed plants typically have microscopic gametophytes. Okay.